to be talking about no-till gardening, so we're going to talk about other options besides getting the rototiller out. Evan Van Order has put this on. He is the soil conservationist in the Hardin Field Office. And Evan, are you going to start off with the presentation, or do you want to start with the...
Let's do the demos. I think
okay.
those are usually gets people's attention and kind of visuals on it.
Discount.
Okay. So we're going to start with a slate test. So I have two different soils here. So this is the one out of your garden?
Yep.
Here, Evan?
Yep.
Okay. And this is a soil from a beet field about a mile away. And they're both Haverson loam, so they're the same soil type. You can see there's quite a bit of color difference between the two. That'd be the first thing to notice. So I'm just going to set these in, and you're going to see how they react differently when they are in water. So we'll put them at the exact same time. So again, we have the no-till garden soil on the left, and the beet field that has probably quite a bit of tillage.
Yeah, probably 60, 70 years.
Kind of wore out, yeah.
Intensive tillage.
So you notice the garden soil is really holding together really well. You can actually even see bubbles coming out as the air comes out of the pore spaces. And then that beet field soil is coming apart very quickly.
So this is really showing what soil structure is about. And structure, as we're going to talk about, is really important for plant growth. And so as that water, those are completely dry clods. They've been out for, I've had them in the office for a month at least, and they're completely dry. And so that water's rushing in there. And so this is showing the strength of the soil aggregates is what we call it, technical term for soil structure, how those particles are glued together. And so we'll talk about that more, but this gives a good visual here of what different management strategies can change the same type of soil and how it performs.
So we'll just let this continue?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, obviously we've got some differences there.
And then we have an infiltration test as well. So these are the exact two same soils. So again, we have the garden soil on my left and the beet field soil on the right. So I'm just going to pour water into the top of these, and there's little holes drilled so it'll simulate rainfall going down into these soils. And then again, we have holes on the bottom of this, and you can see what's kind of running out.
So what do these tests show?
We're going to talk more in depth about that. The main thing is how these soils are reacting or interacting with water, and that's really critical, as we know, for plant growth and growing healthy plants, and a lot of implications here we'll talk about. So this is basically simulating rain, what she's going to do here, or irrigation. So observations. What happened to that 2-inch rainstorm we just got on the beet field?
It ran off.
Yeah, nothing's level around here. Everything has a slope. So when you got that much water sitting on top of soil or running off, when you go to the coffee shop the next day, someone asks you, how much rain did you get at your place? It's like, well, I got 2 inches in the gauge, but how much did you actually get in the soil profile? You know, and so that makes a huge difference. On the no-till, the soil structure is there. That water infiltrates in there very rapidly. It can take quite a bit of amount of rainfall in pretty fast. And so we're really utilizing that free irrigation there, where really that 2 inch of rain, you only got a 1/4 inch actually effective into the soil before the rest of it ran off.
And what else goes with the soil when you have the runoff? You lose some of your topsoil, and any nutrients you put on or pesticides or anything like that will also move off.
So that soil was pulverized, both of them, before you put them in?
Yeah, we crushed them up, and so this one over here, it has, even if you crush it up, it still has those aggregates still knit together. I mean, they're small. And then this one here, of course, the aggregates are gone because it has been worked to a powder, and we had these big clumps and we just kind of crushed them up so we could fit them in there. So yeah, that's but even with those the no-till aggregates being smushed down, they still hold some structure together where they're not sealing off.
This would be a good advertisement for a roller crusher.
Yes. Yeah. And so we'll watch those and see how they finally react. But I mean, look how much time's already passed, and we still
I'm
have.
not sure one drop has even come out of it.
Yeah. So there's
Sealed it off.
it's sealed right off, and so if you don't have an absolutely flat, level field, then you've lost that water. It's gone downhill somewhere into the drain ditch, and like Jenny said, it's going to carry. All of our drain systems are just plugged full of silt and sediment. Constant maintenance on those, and that's all over our topsoil. And topsoil, as we know, is a very important element if we want to continue sustainably farming, and in this case, on our. I'll start the little PowerPoint here. We're going to spend about half the time inside and about half outside. Just depends on how long-winded I get, but which can be long. But yeah, so this is just these are some good demonstrations, visuals that a lot of people walk away with. You don't forget this, because even this, it is holding together here, but you can see the cloudy water, same as the infiltration there, carrying away your topsoil is being transported by the water. We're here, those pore spaces in a good soil structure, we got about 50% openings. If you take a clod of soil, there's about 50% that should be open to air and 50% filled with water, kind of a thing. It's kind of the ratio. And so it has all these macro and micro pores in there. If we could look into it, you can actually see it where you have larger pore spaces for like earthworm holes or root channels going through there. And so when you get that rain, it's going to go right into that soil profile. It's going to find those voids in there and be able to fill up that soil profile with the moisture. And also the important thing is it's going to hold that moisture for plants, in order for plants to have that moisture available for when it needs it. It's kind of like a big sponge. And so Jenny said too, the different colors. What makes a different color in the soil? If they're the same soil type, what's the difference in the color?
Carbon?
Carbon, exactly. Carbon. It's organic matter. The carbon makes that nice mocha brown color. That's what we want, because organic matter, it only makes up maybe 8% of our soil profile in a really healthy system. Most of our agricultural fields are in commercial, industrial, that's been intensively farmed. We've lost a lot of that carbon out of the soil, and it's changed the color. We can have organic matter percentage of maybe 1%, maybe 2% on some decent field around. But native soil, that we go up to the rangeland, can have up to 4%, 6% in some areas. And we can build it up to 8, 10, maybe. What's the possibilities? We don't know. And organic matter, even though it makes up a small percentage of what soil is, it controls over 90% of how the soil functions. And so it's very important that we look at managing for building organic matter into our systems. I'm probably getting way ahead of myself compared to what I have on the slides here. And so here's an example of soil aggregate. And you can see those channels. There's different root channels, earthworm holes. And so you can see it looks like cottage cheese. That's what we want to see in our soils, kind of that crumbly cottage cheese structure there with these pore spaces in there. That's the air and the water channels that we can have that gas exchange and also the moisture in the soil for our plants. How come we can go out to a native range site that's really healthy, that hasn't been overgrazed or mismanaged, and we can see production even in a drought year where it's producing 1,500, 2,000 pounds of grass every year, regardless of if the rest of the area is in a drought? It's because of the soil's in good shape. And we look at what we see out in native ecosystems that have been managed well, and we can see how there's very low inputs into our native range. There's no inputs. We don't fertilize, we don't go out and water a native range, but it produces year after year. It's what we call resilient, the system's resiliency, and it's based on that soil being in a healthy state. So how do we actually take that and replicate it into our agricultural systems or into our gardens? Well, there's basically 5 principles of soil health that we're going to be looking at, and that's to minimize disturbance of the soil, because native range, we don't go out there and plow it, right? We get a little bit of surface action with grazing animals. Also in native range, we have maximized diversity. And so in a gardening situation or in an agricultural system, rotation of plants, of our crops that we're growing, and also using cover crops, which we'll talk about more too. Also, we see in native range that we got the soil's always covered. It has residue on it, right? And so we're going to look at the importance of that. And then also on a healthy native range, we see living roots always through the whole growing season. There's always something growing out there on a healthy site. We can have up to 60 to 100 different species in 1 square meter. If we go out and do a range inventory on a healthy site, it's phenomenal, the diversity that you can see. And a lot of those plants will be spaced out. They're utilizing different parts of the growing season. You have the cool season, you have the warm season, you have the kind of later cool seasons that'll come a little bit later, then you have warm seasons, and then you have that in the fall, you have that cool season flush again. So you always have a living root in that soil system on a healthy site. And then of course you incorporate the grazers into the system that help process that plant material on the top and speed up the nutrient cycle. So really what we're doing is we're creating the most favorable habitat for the soil, what we call a soil food web. Have you heard of a food web before, where one critter eats the other and that one dies, and or something else eats that one, and it's all kind of interrelated? Looks like a spider web when you diagram it out. Well, that very same thing is happening underground, underneath our feet in the soil food web. And we want to do whatever we can to promote that into a healthy system, because that's where a lot of our organic matter is created and stored by the microbes, the biology in the soil, processing and cycling nutrients. So if we're talking about reducing tillage or minimizing tillage in our gardens, what is it actually, what changes when you stop tilling the soil? Well, you start, on our garden, we'll go out there a little bit later, we did till it for a few years, and then we quit and started doing the no-till and soil health principles into the system. And we've seen changes every year in a positive direction, which is kind of fun, because every year you just kind of enjoy being out there more, because you're seeing more improvement in your soil structure and how that soil performs. Soil pores remain continuous. The soil aggregates and that structure, that cottage cheese, they start forming and knitting together, and they're not destroyed, not broken down, so that soil food web then increases. And then you've also created that habitat so that more of that microbiology in the soil wants to be there, and that also increases in diversity. Weed seeds, of course. The big one when we rototill, we're always planting weeds. And we always have that flush of lamb's quarter and bindweed and all those good garden weeds that we always have to deal with. Also, with that good soil structure, when we stop tilling, that we're building those soil aggregates, we can capture and store more water in that soil profile. And then, of course, we always look for the telltale, how many earthworms do you have in your soil when you dig a hole in your garden? That's a good indicator. Earthworms are a good indicator of good soil health, because everything else is there. If you see earthworms, you know that all the microbes, the smaller guys, are doing their job. It's kind of that whole food chain thing. And then micro-arthropods, which arthropods are kind of like a beetle, hard-cased insect. Micro-arthropods, when you can't see, they increase, and they cycle over 20% of our nutrient cycle is due to that group of little critters alone. There's shredders, there's all different categories and types of microarthropods, but they'll actually break down residue, they'll tear it into little pieces, and they'll start to decompose that and bring that organic matter down to our soil profile for us, which before, where we thought rototilling was to incorporate good stuff into our soil profile. The biology wants to do it for you, because that's how it lives, that's how it functions. So, what good does that rototiller actually do? It makes it nice and black, doesn't it? That is nice. I completely confess, I like to move dirt. I'm working on the community garden site. I don't know if you've seen that in the paper or not, but we wanted to just level up the site so we can put our raised beds. And so we got access to this rototiller, and I put it behind the tractor, and it was fun. I rototilled and rototilled and rototilled, kept breaking it down. We just did that so we could level it up in order to put the raised beds in and then have all these mud holes everywhere, because it had some real good dips in it. But I can completely confess, it's addicting to move dirt. But
So what kind of dirt did you put in your raised bed?
we're getting some from a compost facility up in Billings, so and we're not going to use the native dirt there because it's pretty tough. high water table, and there's a lot of weed issues and everything. So we're getting a nice blend that we're going to purchase. And so that rototiller really, all it's doing is destroying the soil structure. It's as soon as we turn that, or we tear up that soil. If you could see it with your eyes, you would see basically carbon going into the air. It's a rapidly oxidizing and going up into the air. So that organic matter that we want to keep in the system and actually increase every time we hit it with a piece of steel, you're basically you're losing it. And so if you can imagine behind the rototiller this fire burning, that's what's happening in the gas exchange, is that it's oxidizing that organic matter. Get a huge flush of bacteria right away, and it starts chewing up that stuff, and then they respirate and lose that CO2 off into the atmosphere. And so really it's going backwards on the organic matter. And then of course we know it dries up the soil. It costs money, you got fuel, time, and for me it usually hurt my back, and so it probably put me out of commission for a week at least, because my lower back would. Whoever designed rototillers, I don't know. I mean, they're like this short, right? And they're heavy. It's like they weren't thinking of people that were 6 feet tall. You know, it really discourages the biology of the soil. The worms really don't like the rototiller going through there, and of course, as I said, my back really does not like it. It's pretty torturous. So how do I actually, you know, we like the rototill in order to be able to plant into a nice seed bed, you know, and fluff it up so we can pack our seeds in there, get a nice clean seed soil contact. And so we're going to look at a number of different options. This is a picture of our garden out there. This is after we fully planted it. I think this is in 2013, I believe. And so this is fully planted. So there's nothing rototilled up. We did have some weed fabric. I did a tree planting in 2012, and I had some leftovers, so I just put in a couple rows there just to try that, and that was pretty good. But over time, of course, we ended up tearing that out and just using mulch instead. So one implement that we use is a jab planter. This steel blue pipe thing, and I've got it back there, so we'll go out and demonstrate how it works. You guys can try it out if you want. It's pretty simple, steel pipe with a little beak nose on it. You can jab it in the ground. It's got a couple different things to adjust for depth, for seeding depth, and then also gives you a gauge for seed spacing, but each seed's got to be jabbed in the ground, and it actually goes pretty quick. You got to wear a little seed pouch or a little nailing apron or whatever, put your seed in there, and you drop one seed in it each time. And so you drop it in, you just squeeze the handles together and lift it out and move on to the next hole, and it closes in that last hole for you, and it goes pretty quick actually, especially with two people or a small child that's dropping the seed in for you each time you jab it in the ground. That works really good too. We've got a few here we can blow now. Okay, that's dropping the seed in. It's pretty simple deal. It's all steel though. It's pretty durable. It's back there on top of the freezer there. You guys can take a look at it later. My neighbor actually bought it, and he saw me out there with a homemade job that I made out of PVC, and he came over and said, "Yeah, I just bought one of these things," and so he brought it over, and so we kind of share it now. It's nice. Another thing is I've got an easy planter back there too. This is a new one that we just can't really see in the picture too well. Yeah, Terry, if you want to grab it. This is my wife Terry, by the way. I got my kids around here. This one's, I'm kind of an engineering nut. I like to see how things work. And so my biggest beef with that, the jab planter, the blue one, is that you had to drop one seed in at a time. And just looking at our supplier that we get all of our garden seeds from, and they had some planting in there. And I saw this in there, and I thought, I'm going to try that out. And this was only $40, where the other one was like $110. And this one here is pretty cool. I think it was Amish design, but you got to supply your own mason jar. That doesn't work. So when I push this down into the soil, you see this little rod coming up, and it's lifting one seed up. It drops it in the pipe for you. This pokes the hole in the ground, and when you lift it up, your seed drops into the hole. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's pretty handy.
I thought that was pretty cool. But it's got a few things. I'm gonna, probably put a foot peg on here, so you can put all your pressure here instead of on this little wood handle, because it does slip around a little bit. But overall, it works pretty good in a no-till situation. I'm always looking for what's going to work good on a no-till. I can get good seeding and do it quickly. We planted all of our peas this year with that, and we're going to do beans tonight. And it works pretty good. A couple of the peas we'd get a double in the shoot, but overall it worked pretty good. Other things like small seeded, the lettuces, the kales, the radishes, everything you just drag the corner of a hoe. And if you have to, you can rake back some of the residue and then drag the hoe. If you get too much straw or residue in there. But that works really good. Just go back with your hand and just fluff the soil you did, kind of move the hoe back over it and pat it down and walk over it. Pretty much the same. And then we do a lot with transplants. We're doing more and more every year. My back deck is covered right now, and my living room is covered at night when it gets cold because we bring them all in. But that's always fun. And I always make the mistake of starting stuff too early. You know, you guys ever get too anxious? March, I'm like, oh, let's plant some pumpkins, right? Not a good idea. Because my pumpkins are flowering right now. And they're in solo cups, right? I'm picking flowers off and they're getting kind of mad at me, you know, they want to go in the soil. But, so I started to hold 2 more trays of the smaller cups now, and so I think those are going to be my good performers this year. So how do you start? And, you know, in minimizing disturbance, the biggest hurdle to get over is how do I do this without the rototiller? And so if you got a previously tilled garden, biggest thing is to cover it. You want to cover it with as much mulch and straw, and timing is the issue with covering, because if you cover it too early, your soil is going to stay too wet and cold. And so if you're going to cover it a little bit later in the spring. You can put some on it. You know, now is fine because it's warm enough. Did you have a question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I thought we heard something last March about not using straw, that hay was better, old hay was better.
Hay can work, but I use a lot of straw. That's all I use, and I haven't had an issue with it. Some people are worried about volunteer grain coming up with the straw, or 2,4-D residue, or broadleaf residue on that straw. And so I'm always asking where I get my straw. Do you know how many times it's been, been sprayed, and try to, or get some older stuff that over time that chemical will break down. We're not organic certified or anything.
Maybe it was something I read. I don't remember where I heard it, but it said something about some of the plants had these little bitty, like a fungus or something, not a fungus. There was something on the stems of the plants.
Oh, okay.
Caused from the straw.
Oh, right.
So after all the straw and all the trouble and all the fighting, we got rid of all the straw and tilled the garden.
Oh, okay. So you did have that pest problem?
Well, I did have a bunch of little bumps on a lot of my plants.
Oh.
But I didn't know what they were.
Yeah, I had no idea.
They were little bumps. They didn't crawl around, so it wasn't that, but there were little...
Cut them and brought them into Evan. He'd tell you.
Well, bring them into MSU Extension, because then they can ship them off to the lab, because I'm not an entomologist. But yeah, if you have pest issues, that's a good idea.
So it is okay to use straw then?
Yeah, that's all I use.
We use old hay.
Yeah, old hay works good too. Hay, you can get some seed issues in there, and perennial grasses if you're cutting like orchard grass or something.
Well, I wanted old hay, but my husband brought
So what is
straw.
if your hay is a little moldy?
I don't think it'll hurt anything if you just fluff it up and spread it out, and yeah, it'll decompose.
How deep should it be?
It depends, and that goes to the timing. I don't really heavily mulch until like, I think Father's Day weekend we really hit it hard last year. It was like almost perfect. That's when we went in and just mulched everything really heavy with a couple large square bales of straw that we got. And that was just perfect timing. We did one good weeding like the weekend before. I remember we just spent like a full day or so, day and a half, doing some real close weeding. Stuff in between the rows we don't worry about. We just mulch it and cover it, smother it, and then we can pull it if it does survive.
You don't lay newspaper under it first?
No. I try to work smarter, not harder, so I don't know. The less I have to do, the better. Not that that's not smart. I think it has some benefits to it.
What about using that landscape fabric?
And that's what we did we had a couple rows of that, and that worked good for a few years, but then you have wind issues over time. Ends would start getting loose in the wind, we like to also put we've got a few calves or cows, and we have some calves in the fall, winter, and we'll let them graze in the garden just to
Oh,
get
I
the,
see.
and
Okay,
so that
you don't want that,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
yeah, so we're just using the mulch for now. Straw, grass clippings, leaves, etc. Just be conscious of
Oh,
that.
so it is okay to use grass clippings?
The other thing is the 2,4-D residue. If you're using weed and feed on your lawn, that could have adverse effects on your vegetables.
As in a year ago or recent?
Best thing,
3 years at least.
3 years is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It can take a really long time to break
Boy,
down.
we just fertilized the yard too.
Yeah.
It depends how much weed and feed you use.
Yeah, it depends on the timing and all that.
But it can make it so nothing will grow in your garden except onions and
Oh wow.
things like that,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not worth the risk.
Yeah, we don't put anything on our yard. We just dump our grass clippings, and obviously you see all the dandelions that you pulled in. I told my son earlier today, I said, go out there and mow those dandelions down, and then the battery was dead in the lawnmower. So,
We can't use the grass clippings no
it's
more.
just pride. But yeah, grass clippings will work. Grass clippings alone will mat down and actually cause some other issues with going anaerobic, where you don't get the oxygen in there. And we'll look at that some more. With good soil structure, you have aerobic environment where oxygen is able to get down into the soil. That's good. Because anaerobic is you're going to start getting more disease issues and things that like to live in those type of environments aren't good for your health or your plants. So keeping things aerobic where oxygen is able to get in, and we'll look at that. We're going to talk about composting too. So,
What about these people that are using like Roundup, whatever alfalfa seed? So does it have, and then they're Rounduping their
in the garden.
alfalfa?
Oh yeah, Roundup really doesn't have the residual carryover
That.
where it will actually in the hay. I haven't seen or heard of any issues with that actually injuring the plants in the garden. Tomatoes are really susceptible to it. I know if you do use any herbicide, you got to read the label, because I had a guy in Miles City talk to, and he did use glyphosate for weed control in his garden. And he was doing no-till, and he sprayed it like 3 days before he put his transplants out. And then his tomatoes didn't produce anything, because tomatoes you have to wait 30 days, I think, or 3 weeks. I can't remember what the label says. But they are real susceptible to any residual of that. So.
And what could be used? Roundup?
Yeah, well, glyphosate is a non-branded Roundup. Yeah. That's the chemical in Roundup. So other thing is cover crop mix, using cover crops in gardens, and we'll talk more about that too. I have a jar of seed here. Cover crops are really fun. We do a part of our field up here that we graze. We just have 10 acres that we can irrigate, and we plant up the cover crops the last 2 years. This is going to be our 3rd year. And I tell you what, if you want something fun, just pick a spot in your garden and just plant cover crops, because you don't know what's going to come up. And it's just like it's really fun. So, we'll go out in the field, pick sunflowers, pick the hairy veg, pick buckwheat, and the cows love it. It's like pastry. Herbicide, and so if you're doing a new garden site, like if you're going to take part of your yard, you can use herbicide, like glyphosate. Roundup product is one label. Read the label, as we just talked. It may be necessary with real persistent perennial weed, like bindweed. It's tough to get that out of the system. But I understand in the garden nobody likes to use chemicals. I don't either. But it's some people do it, and it's successful. It's an easy way to convert part of your yard. Other organic method would be using acetic acid, vinegar, real strong, 10% or higher. Higher than what you buy in the store. I don't know what percentage that is in the store, 4%, 5%. And that will burn down the top, whatever it comes in contact with. It'll kill the tissue. So it doesn't actually kill the root, but if you keep doing it, it'll set back where it can't build up those reserves in the roots, and eventually you'll get on top of the weeds that way. That's an organic alternative to it.
And then your plants will grow, or you have to wait.
As long as you don't get it on the actual leaf, that vinegar won't hurt the crops that you're trying to grow. I had one guy tell me that he killed his whole garden using it, and he was careful about not overspraying, he said, but I don't know if he had some kind of drip going on or what. He was, and I don't know, I never heard of that before being an issue, so. new example. This is up over in North Dakota. This is a conservation district up there, and they wanted to do this no-till garden. So they took part of their yard and they grew that the first year, which is pretty cool. There used to be a little YouTube video that you could watch of how describing that. They did use glyphosate to kill the grass. They put 2 applications down early spring, and then used a jab planter, and no fertilizer, minimum labor, of course, because and then they didn't have any weed issues either. You can see how heavily they mulched it also. But kind of a cool deal. They get a lot of traffic there, and people could see what they're doing with promoting the soil health principles there of minimizing that disturbance. And so the next minimize disturbance is number 1. We've got 4 more to go, right? Maximize diversity. Nature abhors uniformity. All right, that's a Frank Benza quote there, professor from Utah State. Nature abhors uniformity. So look anywhere in nature around in a healthy system and show me where there's not diversity. You know, if we look at healthy, functional ecosystems, there's a ton of diversity. I think that's a pretty cool picture for us to learn from in a lot of applications. Plant diversity equals soil microbe diversity. And so we're talking about the soil structure here. What forms those aggregates is the biology in the soil. What's actually gluing together those particles of sand, silt, and clay in the organic matter is the biology. We can't do that. We can't put Elmer's glue in the soil and hope that it forms soil structure, but the microbes do it because it's creating their own habitat. And so if they're living and breathing and eating and they're excreting, and that's the clue. The biology in the soil is excreting out their exudates, their excrement. And that is actually what glues together these soil particles and makes the soil structure so that water and air can get into the soil profile. It works really good. They're really good at it. A lot better than we are. We can't do that. There's a symbiotic relationship that plants and microbes form. Now, when we talk about microbes, if I take one clump of healthy soil, like we had in here, if I take 1 tablespoon actually of that soil, how many microbes, how many organisms do you think is in that tablespoon of soil? What's that?
Millions.
Millions, even higher on a healthy site. Healthy site. There's over, they estimate over 7 billion different individual microbes and microorganisms in that soil structure in a tablespoon. So how many people are on the face of this earth today? How many humans? About 7 to 8 billion. So if you think about it, there is so much life in our soil in a healthy ecosystem that is doing so much in there that we can't see. And so we're just scratching the surface of learning what's actually this interaction between plants and these microbes. And it's pretty fascinating to see how the plants actually form these relationships with the microbes. Because there's this whole sugar trading system that's going on, sugar and nutrients. We can't harvest the energy from the sun, can we? If we go outside on a sunny day, are we going to receive the nutrition that we need? We can get the vitamin, what is it, vitamin D? Is that the one you get from the sun? Yeah, okay. That's about it, right? And other than that, we get a sunburn. But plants are designed that they can actually take in the sun's energy and then the carbon dioxide out of the air, and they produce sugar, which is energy. It's life, carbon. Our lives are carbon-based. And so it's all about carbon. And so plants have this amazing ability through photosynthesis to take in the sunlight and take the atmospheric carbon dioxide out of there and produce a sugar, which produces energy for life. The microbes have that figured out. So plants, as we're learning, are very generous. It's, you know, you watch those nature videos and it's like the stronger survive, you know, the strong will eat the weak, and it's always this fight for life. Well, what we're realizing with plants is that they're very generous. They're not self-centered. They're actually wanting to overproduce what they actually need in order to support the community in the soil. And so there's some really great pictures there also. And where this all happens is right around the root of the plant. It's called the rhizosphere. It's where transactions are made, where this plant is going to overproduce sugars, carbohydrates, and it's going to leak it out of its roots into the soil profile around it. It knows that's a good thing to do because those microbes then are attracted to that very area around the roots of your plants. And the microbes will actually bring in nutrients that that plant needs in exchange for that sugar that plant's producing. And so if we look at all that diversity, 7 billion organisms in a tablespoon, and these plants kind of have it figured out, and the microbes kind of have it figured out, that if we create a really strong, healthy environment of diversity in the soil, that the bad guys don't win. All right? And when we talk about microbes in the soil, over 90% are beneficial. Only 10% or less are actually the ones that will cause disease and problems with our crops. And so when we see a disease or problem in our crops in the agricultural field, we go out and spray insecticide and fungicide and all these sides out there. What are we doing? We're pretty much eliminating, or we're putting everything back to zero, and that leaves an open palette then for the bad guys to move right back in, and we start this cycle back over. But if we're really promoting good beneficial biology in the soil, we're gonna have that disease under control, where we don't have to put inputs in there, and we can start building the system instead of completely destroying it and then rebuilding and completely destroying it. I like to call it the carbon syrup. I heard this term the other day as for that carbon exchange that happens. And so you can imagine that carbon's coming out of the air, going into the plant, turning into a sugar, leaking out into the soil. The microbes in the soil take it up. They do their whole life cycle, and then they do what? They die, right? And they release the nutrients back to the plant also. And so it cycles the nutrients in the soil for our plants where we don't have to put in synthetic fertilizers in. Because the native range doesn't need synthetic fertilizers. Why should our gardens need it? If you're an agronomist here, I'm not promoting that we don't buy, but we can at least wean ourselves off where we don't have to put excessive amounts. If I showed you a chart, I've got this chart at work, I don't have it with me here, of how much nitrogen we actually put out there. We have to continually put more and more nitrogen out there to keep the same production levels because our plants are becoming so much nitrogen dependent. The more you use, the more you're going to have to use, kind of a thing. Because the microbes get lazy, the plants get lazy, and that whole symbiotic relationship is broken. And so we become more dependent on synthetic inputs into our system. Oh, that was a good picture. I know. These are plant root hairs here. And then this is actually on a little pine tree. And pine trees, the conifers form mycorrhizal fungal relationship. And then you get all these mycorrhizal fungi that actually attach themselves to the root hairs, and they form a network. This is in a forest system. This doesn't. Not many of our plants are mycorrhizal fungal associated in our vegetable gardens, but it's just amazing to see how far those extend. And they can actually pump the nutrients that plant needs. It'll actually send a chemical signal out to its roots, and then the fungus knows what it needs to exchange in order to get the sugars for that plant to be healthy. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of cool documentaries on where are we going here? Okay. So diversity, how do we do that in the garden? And so this is a picture of, we do row planting, but we like to pack diversity in. And you guys probably do that too. We plant lettuce and spinach, and here we have endive. We've got collard greens on the backside that are getting smushed out by the endive. You know, the more diversity we can get into a square foot or into a small area, the more we're going to actually be seeing beneficial in the soil below.
Tom always thinks I crowd everything. He wants everything away from, you know.
Yeah, right. Space.
Same way.
Yeah. I still like rows. Some guys, I know they're just throwing all their seed and just letting it all grow.
That's kind of how I do it.
Yeah.
Then Tom's out with the tape measure.
Yeah. Again, I have that engineering side to me, and I'm Dutch, and you look at, it's kind of like the Russian German thing going on with sugar beets, you know, it's nice to have straight rows. But in the garden, you guys heard of Three Sisters, where you plant your corn, your beans, and your squash all together. It's kind of an old practice that is kind of becoming popular again, where you plant them all together because they all benefit each other. The squash plants will help your weed control. The beans are actually, they're legumes, so they fix nitrogen. Corn loves nitrogen, so you got kind of this whole relationship going on. And corn pumps a lot of sugar into the ground. If you grow sweet corn, dig up a root and clean it off if you got some EBGs about microbes, and chew on it. It's really sweet. There's a ton of sugar in your corn roots. Another strategy is using cover crops. Again, we use like a 10-way blend that we plant. and that adds a lot of diversity. And then companion cropping also, you can interplant, like you're doing, Cheryl, so you just interplant together. So this is a picture of our cover crops that we grew last year. It has buckwheat, it has some Florida broadleaf mustard, some forage kale, some corn. We had some oats in there, hairy vetch. I don't see any flowers of it. We try something new every year just to see what will grow, and it's really neat to see how that they interact and actually produce a lot of biomass. And we had some issues with our irrigation last year with drowning out big parts of our field, so it didn't look real great all over, but there were some areas that did really good. And so hopefully we got it fixed this year. We did a little scraping this year, soil disturbance, because we have to flood irrigate where we're at. Okay, living root, that's the next one here. So keep a living root as long as you can into that soil profile through the growing season. That's the idea, all right? So maximizing that harvest of the sun's energy that's available through the growing season while the soil's warm enough to grow something. And so you're feeding that biology, you're capturing that sunlight, you're producing those sugars and getting it into the soil profile. That's the key. How much carbon can I get into the soil? That's where my focus is. If I can get more carbon in the soil, I know my crops next year are going to do better. And I'm going to keep building on that system. Cover crops, again, are a good way to do that. If you have like lettuce or a cool season crop that's going to mature early and you're going to harvest, go back in there and plant the cover crop on that section of the garden. That keeps a living root, keeps something going, and gets that diversity in there. Like vegetable sequencing, you can do that after lettuce. You can replace it with radishes or beans, something that'll still grow in the heat of the summer. Like in your corn, you can do underseeding here in the middle. That we look. Laser doesn't work anymore. And so that's one way of keeping living roots. Gardens are typically doing this already because we want to maximize what we're getting out of the garden. So you guys are already kind of doing this stuff. Living roots and diversity, we usually grow quite a bit in our garden space. But if we can try to just continue to tailor our management of that, where we can build that soil environment. All right, so next one, keep it soil covered. So this is the key. We already kind of talked about that, mulching with straw. That suppresses weeds. It conserves the moisture in the soil. It's going to store it in the soil structure is, but then having a covering on, it's just like your skin. It protects the soil, and also it's like wearing a coat. Also, it's going to protect your soil from extremes of temperature. Also, it keeps it cooler in the heat of summer. In August and July, if that soil gets over 90 degrees, you start seeing microbial activity start going way down. And you're not producing as much or cycling as much nutrients. But if you can keep that soil covered in the heat of the summer especially, you're going to see that it encourage more of that nutrient cycling and building fertility in your soil. And again, that mulch is going to provide that habitat. Your earthworms are going to be really happy if you keep it mulched. They come up and grab a piece and drag it back underground and eat their steak dinner that night. You ever see a video of a worm pulling a corn leaf down? There's a cool one on YouTube. It just sits there and it pulls this gigantic leaf down this little wormhole, and you just see them working at it. And that's actually bringing the carbon down into the soil profile for us. It protects the soil surface. Now you think about rain, you don't think of that as being very threatening, or if you use sprinklers, those raindrops or those little water drops, when they're actually hitting the soil surface, how fast are they going? Give me a guess. 30 miles, 20 to 30 miles an hour, depends on how far up it fell from and reached its maximum potential. But if you think about that, 20 to 30 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden impact, there's a lot of energy in one little drop of water. And so if we're looking at soil aggregate stability, soil structure, that raindrop, if it's not protected, is going to smash apart that soil aggregate. And so what you can see, especially when there's not much glue already in the soil, when that rain hits that surface, it's going to seal it off. You guys have probably seen that where your gardens are crusty after the rain and then dries out. That crust means it's sealed off. It didn't have, it destroyed the soil structure right on that surface there, and then you lost that potential for a lot of that water to go in. And so that armor on the soil with residue is essential if we're going to increase our infiltration rate, get that rainwater into our soil profile and utilize what we're getting from the sky. And the biggest thing is temperature and maintaining that soil structure there that we see. Again, without the residue cover, we've got a little thermometer we take around when we go and visit producers and look at how hot the soil actually gets when you don't have any soil, any cover on it. In the heat of the day in August out here, or in July, on a field that's tilled and bare ground, you can stick that thermometer in there and you can get temperatures up to 120 degrees surface temperature. If you ever, you know how an asphalt parking lot is in the heat of the summer. And anything over on this chart, you can see anything above 95, you're losing 15% of moisture is used for growth. 85% is being lost through evaporation and transpiration. If you're below that, around 70 degrees of soil temperature, it's perfect. 100% moisture is used for growth. You're not losing any up into the atmosphere. You get up there above 100 degrees, some bacteria species start dying. If they're in that top surface inch, they won't be able to survive and they'll start dying. And then over 113, you have the 130, 100% of the moisture is lost to evaporation. You're losing that moisture back up. And then at 140, it kills everything. And so if we can keep our soils in this optimum range down here, 70 to 80 degrees, that's perfect. And so we do that with mulch or cover. So this is mulching. We had some pumpkin transplants there and mulch. This is actually, this photo over here is what we seeded, or we actually put our onion sets into our corn stubble from last year. So you can see the amount of residue that was there. That always armoring the soil. Since then we've had some wind issues and there is some bare spots out there, but we'll start mulching here once it warms up a little bit more. Overall, we're building resiliency into the system. That's the key. We had an epic year of grasshoppers last year here. You guys didn't have it down by you guys, Bonnie and Dave, did you? I was just fighting. What's that?
Turkeys ate them.
Turkeys ate them. You guys got turkeys. I need to get more turkeys. Well, we had an epic year. It just kind of came in from the edge of the garden and just went it slowly crept up in there. And a lot of these plants were set back, but with the resiliency, I think it is too that we're forming that good soil structure. We're getting that beneficial system working. The plants, they carried through it. They were resilient through it. Even though a lot of the leaf matter was ate, they resprouted, re-leafed in a lot of it, and we had a great year. And so that's what I want to see. I want to be able to see weathering that insect, the pest issues, you know, we don't have to worry about drought because we're watering, but being able to go longer without having to water. We probably irrigate half as much as we used to on it. I mean, we'll turn it on for a couple hours, where before we had to leave it on all night and go and turn it off in the morning, and then you got a mud hole that you have to go and walk through. Now we just walk out on the straw and it's nice even after an inch rain. And another thing, and this isn't always an option for different situations, but if you can, throw some grazers into it. If you got some chickens, ducks, turkeys, cattle, if you got after the crop, you can go in and eat that residue. It's on a small scale in the garden. You know, we turned ours in for just a few hours. I think we did this year. We put 5 of them in there, and they just had a heyday. They would run from the collard greens. You know, one thought he was missing out on that, and then they'd run over and grab the sweet corn, and then go back and eat some. You know, it was kind of fun. We were out there. I was like filming them on my phone, and one stopped and what's that?
It was free entertainment.
It was. And then one stopped and just peed right there in front of me, and I'm like filming it. I'm like, cool. Terry was like, "Boy, you're weird." It's like, that's nutrient cycling. But yeah, it's kind of fun that day. Other practices for soil health is you can extend your season with high tunnels and low tunnels. This is a low tunnel just made with simple PVC pipe with a row cover, so you can start stuff early in the season and also go later into the fall with cool season crops. It's one way to maximize that living root in the soil, as long as you keep something growing. Compost tea applications. We're going to do another workshop later this summer. I'll cover more of that, but we'll look at compost here in a minute. And compost tea is basically taking that compost and making extracting the microbes and the nutrients out of that, and so you can actually spread the benefits of that compost further by making a tea application and drenching the soil with it. Another thing that we played around with biochar. It's all about carbon, right? Biochar is A really popular thing now, you can see a lot of stuff online about it. It's actually revisiting something that they discovered a long time ago down in Amazon rainforest. They find where the organic matter, this is a picture of the soil here, it's called terra preta. You can see how dark that is. Well, in the rainforest, it's a very weathered system down there. They have lots of rain. All that mineralization and breakdown of organic matter happens very quickly, and most of their soils kind of look like this pale brown down here, the yellowish. Where they're finding is where civilization has had large populations in the past, thousands of years ago. They're finding these deep, rich soils. They're like, what's going on here? They call it terra preta. And they dug these pits in there, and they find all of this evidence of man putting organic matter into the soil to build fertility for their food system. They were able to support large populations of indigenous populations down there before smallpox and all that kind of wiped them out in a lot of areas. But they're finding these sites, and they call it terra preta, where they were actually making carbon. They were not making carbon, but they were making charcoal and putting it into their farm fields in order to build up the carbon levels in order to increase production. So biochar, you can make your own biochar, inoculate it in your compost or add it to your compost. It holds nutrients, carbon, pure carbon holds nutrients. That's why we use it in carbon filters and to treat our water and all that stuff. And it locks in nutrients and it holds it for a long time. And so you can add that to your soil and to your compost, and then that's one way of increasing your organic matter, but your long, stable carbon levels. That will be there for a long time. That's a whole nother workshop on itself. Okay, so compost. Anybody interested in composting? We'll kind of fly through this. What time are we at? I've been probably long-winded enough.
6:30.
Ooh, really? That's an hour already. You want to go through this or you want to go out? I have handouts on it. I did print this out. We'll do this quickly. Compost. You guys know what compost is, right? It's decomposed organic waste matter material that's rich in nutrients and alive with microbiology. That's what we want. We're replicating, basically, we're magnifying what nature does already. Leaf litter falls to the ground, microbes eat it, and it kind of composts itself. Well, if we can speed that up and add it to our gardens, then it's a beneficial thing for us. Nature isn't broke, why are we always trying to fix it, right? So basically using what we've learned from nature around us and using it to grow healthier crops. And again, I talked about that nitrogen curve, that the more we use, the more we have to use. Synthetic inputs typically throw the cycle out of balance. And so if we can eliminate or reduce synthetic inputs, we're on a good track. Biggest question is, how do you make good compost? This is a nice little chart, and that's why I made a printout so you can take it home with you too. Gives you kind of a breakdown. Brown material, leaf litter, straw, newspaper, sawdust. Green material, garden waste, lawn clippings. Again, be careful of the herbicide residues. And then high nitrogen, manure and coffee. So it's a 45, 45, 10% mix, roughly. I don't measure. It looks good to my eye, I guess.
Does coffee have nitrogen in it?
Yes, it does. And it's good carbon base. It's, yep. Yeah, that's probably most of my compost is coffee. I drink a lot more, we're way over 10%. So the biggest thing with compost, especially in Montana, as dry as it gets here, is moisture. If you want to keep it actively decomposing in those microbes, you got to monitor the moisture and you got to manage it. You want that aerobic condition, lots of oxygen, and you want that nice moisture level into it, about 60%. Creates that beneficial habitat or for beneficial microbes. So the easiest way is to grab a handful of that compost and squeeze it. If the water flows out of it like a sponge, it's too much water. Add some dry material, straw, leaves, sawdust. If you squeeze it and it crumbles apart and your hand is dry, there's no film left on it, that's not enough water. Okay, so add some more. Compost stays in a clump, the hand is damp, that's perfect. About 40 to 60% moisture content is ideal. So just some rough rules of thumb there to keep it in an ideal condition. Again, I've got printouts there, you can take a look at it. Next thing you want to monitor is, besides moisture, is temperature. So we want to keep it in this range of 130 to 160 degrees. 140 degrees at about 2 weeks at that will kill most weed seeds. I don't know about bindweed, I don't know if enough temperature, it might go forever, I don't know. But 14 days for most weeds, you can kill it with 140 degrees. Again, another thing to look at is carbon-nitrogen ratio. That's again to that brown, green, and high nitrogen inputs, keeping that ratio about right. That determines how long you should cook it for. Ideal carbon-nitrogen ratio is 30 to 1. And this chart here gives you some rough ideas of how much carbon to nitrogen ratio is different materials you put in there. You know, wood chips are high carbon, 800 to 1 versus pig manure at 5 to 1, so lots of nitrogen in pig manure. So what to look for? What does good compost look like? I like to use I don't like to have to measure stuff. Even though I work for a federal agency that likes numbers, I don't like numbers. I like to just use my eyes and my senses. Smell. So mocha brown, like good chocolate. That's the color we want to see. Smell, we want to smell that nice, sweet, earthy smell, okay? So if you go and get some compost from somebody and it smells putrid like a sewer pit, don't take it home. It's not a favorite. You want, because the smell is going to tell you if it's aerobic or anaerobic. Aerobic, oxygen is present. You're going to get those beneficial microbes and it's going to produce that sweeter smell. Good texture, moist, clumpy. Cottage cheesy, kind of clumpy, that's good. Bad compost, opposite. Black in color, black slimy, smells putrid, swampy. That's not good compost. Now I've got some out here actually that's not good. Where we had some old straw and I put some grass clippings that was too much to put into my compost bins. I just turned it over the other day with a little box laying on the tractor and it was nasty.